The sun was setting when Lucy finally opened her eyes. The soft twilight light filtered through the partially open blinds, bathing the intensive care room in shades of orange and gold. For a moment, she allowed herself to be absorbed by the tranquility of the room until the reality of her condition imposed itself. The tubes, the monitors, the subtle beep of the electrocardiogram. Lucy tried to move, but weakness overcame her, and every muscle protested. "She's awake!" The voice of a nurse broke the silence, prompting activity around her. Lucy tried to speak, but only a whisper escaped her lips. The nurse, sensing her struggle, approached and murmured, "Don't strain yourself, Mrs. Robert. You're safe." Before Lucy could go any further, voices filtered in from the corridor. Familiar voices, including Richard, her husband. She closed her eyes to listen better. "The doctor was clear about her chances," said Richard, his voice tinged with false emotion that Lucy immediately recognized. "But if she fully recovers, you know how cunning she is," retorted a female voice, laden with worry. "It won't happen, Pauline." "She won't make it," replied Richard, trying to sound reassuring. Lucy felt a pain in her chest, not from her physical state, but from the betrayal carried by their words. She knew that voice well. It was Pauline, her second cousin, always so close, always so fake. With her eyes still closed, Lucy pondered her options. An idea began to form, a spark amidst the desolation of her situation. She would pretend to remember nothing, a convenient amnesia that would give her time and space to observe and plan. When Richard and Pauline entered the room, they found Lucy with her eyes open, looking at them without recognition. Richard approached, holding her hand with a studied gentleness. "Lucy, my love, you're awake. Do you recognize me?" Lucy looked at him, her gray eyes cold and calculating beneath the mask of confusion she had adopted. Who are you?" she murmured, her voice weak but firm enough to sow doubt. Richard's expression was a mix of relief and worry, but in Pauline's eyes, Lucy saw a flicker of fear. She knew she had made the right choice. Now it was about playing the game to the end. In the following days, Lucy continued her act of amnesia with meticulous precision. Under the guise of confusion and fragility, she listened carefully to the conversations around her, picking up nuances and subliminal messages that no one thought she would notice. "She looks so vulnerable, doesn't she?" commented Aunt Helene during a visit, smoothing the blanket over Lucy. "The poor thing barely knows who we are," Richard agreed, squeezing Lucy's hand. "Yes, it's heartbreaking, but perhaps it's better this way for now, given her condition," he said. Lucy, with her eyes closed as if sleeping, felt bitterness grow inside her. Her own husband wished for her to remain incapacitated. She knew she had to act, but how? The plan needed more time to develop, more information to be effective. That night, while pretending to sleep, she heard Pauline whispering to Richard in the corridor. "Are you sure she remembers nothing? It could backfire if she starts regaining her memory." Richard's whisper was hard and urgent. "I'm controlling her medication, and the doctor is an old family friend. Don't worry, Pauline. Besides, we are legally protected. The will is still in our favor." Lucy felt her heart beat faster. Had they corrupted the doctor too? The extent of the betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. She needed an ally, someone she could trust completely. The next day, Lucy decided to test her niece Juliet, who often kept her company and seemed genuinely concerned for her well-being. "Juliet," Lucy began hesitantly, her voice still weak. "I feel like I remember nothing, but sometimes it seems like flashes of memory emerge. Could you help me remember?" Juliet looked around to make sure they were alone before leaning forward and taking Lucy's hand. "Of course, Aunt Lucy. I'm here for you. What do you want to know?" "I want to know about Richard and Pauline. Are they close?" Juliet hesitated, her gaze fixed on Lucy's pleading eyes. Yes, they are. Lately, they've been spending a lot of time together. But Aunt, there are things that might. Please, I need to know, pleaded Lucy with a mix of fear and determination. They meet often and sometimes talk about the future, about what will happen to the family, Juliet murmured, visibly uncomfortable. Lucy squeezed Juliet's hand in gratitude. Thank you, my dear. That means a lot to me. By the end of the day, thanks to the new information provided by Juliet, Lucy knew she was on the verge of unraveling the web of deceit woven around her. With each revelation, her determination to rewrite her will and her future only grew stronger. In the following days, Lucy dedicated herself to cultivating Juliet's trust, her only true ally in the circle of family predators. Each visit, Juliet brought new information, snippets of overheard conversations, details of family meetings from which Lucy was absent. Every fragment of information was a precious piece that Lucy meticulously added to the puzzle she was assembling. One rainy afternoon, as the sound of raindrops hit the hospital room window, Juliet arrived with a particularly worried look on her face. Aunt Lucy, I heard something today that you need to know, said Juliet, sitting carefully by the bed. Richard intends to move his investments, and it seems he's trying to speed up the process of my inheritance, Lucy added, bitterness tinging her weak voice. Juliet nodded, looking at her clasped hands. Yes, and he mentioned something about changing access to your bank accounts. He's trying to position himself as your sole administrator. Lucy felt a cold wave wash over her body despite the heavy blanket covering her. This can't happen, Juliet. We need a lawyer, someone outside this web, someone who can't be manipulated by Richard. I thought of that too, said Juliet, her eyes lighting up a bit. I know someone, a former professor from law school. He specializes in estate law and family ethics. I can trust him. Contact him, please. Do it discreetly and bring him here if possible. I need to make legal changes before it's too late, said Lucy, each word laden with determination. In the following days, while waiting for the lawyer's visit, Lucy continued to play the role of the confused, amnesiac patient, observing, listening, and waiting, knowing that every passing moment was another Richard could use to prepare his next move. Finally, on a foggy morning, Juliet arrived with an older man, with a straight posture and a keen look. Aunt Lucy, this is Mr. Harold Finch. He's here to help you. Lucy shook Finch's hand more firmly than her facade of weakness allowed. Mr. Finch, thank you for coming. We have a lot to discuss. Finch pulled up a chair to sit beside the bed. I am well aware of your situation, Mrs. Robert. Juliet has told me the essentials, and I'm here to help protect what is rightfully yours. While Richard and Pauline schemed downstairs, Lucy and Finch worked in the hospital room, weaving a new set of legal protections and barriers against the greedy plans forming around her. Lucy knew that the battle was just beginning, but with Finch by her side, she felt a bit more prepared to face what was coming. Sitting on her hospital bed, a pile of documents before her, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Finch, with his experience and insight, proved to be an invaluable ally. First, we'll set up a durable power of attorney that will allow you to control your financial and medical decisions in case you can't make them in the future, Finch explained, handing her a document. It must be someone trustworthy, someone who isn't Richard. Lucy nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she held the pen. Juliet will be that person. She's the only one I trust now. Finch adjusted his glasses, observing Lucy with an expression of respect. A wise choice. Juliet seems to genuinely care about your well-being. As they discussed the next steps, there was a gentle knock at the door. Juliet entered, her face pale, showing signs of fatigue. Aunt, Richard is beginning to suspect my frequent visits. He asked me directly if I was helping you with anything. She exchanged a worried look with Finch. "We need to speed things up. We don't have much time before he tries something drastic." "I agree," said Finch. "Let's prioritize modifying the will now. The faster we act, the less chance he has to interfere." They worked for hours, scrutinizing every clause and line, ensuring there were no loopholes Richard could exploit. As Lucy signed the final documents, her heart pounded with a mix of determination and fear. "Now, keep this secret until everything is secure and official," Finch advised as he and Juliet left the room. Lucy lay back on her pillows, exhausted from the day's tension. She knew that Richard's next actions would be decisive, and she had to be ready. Later that evening, Richard sneaked into Lucy's room. He sat by her bedside, holding her hand with a tenderness Lucy knew was false. "Darling, how are you feeling?" he asked, his voice too soft to be sincere. Lucy, faithful to her role, looked at him blankly. "Tired, Richard. Very tired. Rest, my love. Everything will be fine," he murmured, planting a light kiss on her forehead before leaving again. Alone, Lucy closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to mentally review all the steps ahead. The war was far from over, but now, armed with her newly adjusted legal documents, and with reliable allies by her side, she felt a bit stronger to face what was coming. The atmosphere in the hospital was tense, a storm of suspicion and secrets looming on the horizon. Lucy, now better prepared and less isolated thanks to enhanced legal protection, waited for the opportune moment to unmask Richard and Pauline. Each visit from Richard was a chess game, each word exchanged a strategic move. One Thursday afternoon, while Richard was in a work meeting, Lucy summoned Juliet and Harold Finch for a crucial meeting. "Everything is ready, Aunt Lucy. We have copies of the documents in various places and instructions for the lawyer in case anything happens to me," Juliet explained, handing a file to Lucy. Finch looked grave. "It's time to think about the next step. I suggest a family meeting to announce the new changes. This will put Richard and Pauline in a position where they have to show their true colors in front of everyone." Lucy agreed, feeling a mix of relief and nervousness. "Let's do it. I need to end this once and for all." The next day, the hospital conference room was reserved, and the Robert family gathered. The tension was palpable. Richard held Lucy's hand, a gesture that now filled her with disgust. Pauline struggled to hide her nervousness, casting furtive glances at Richard. Lucy, in a firm voice, broke the silence. "I thank you all for coming. I know these past weeks have been difficult, but I need to talk to you about my will and some important decisions." Richard squeezed Lucy's hand. "Honey, are you sure? Don't you want to rest a bit more?" Interrupting him firmly, Lucy continued, "No, Richard, this is important." Harold Finch stood up and handed out copies of the revised will. The room filled with murmurs as each family member perused the documents. "As you can see, I have made some significant changes. Juliet will be my attorney, and there are clear specifications on the distribution of my assets, excluding now." Lucy paused, looking directly at Richard and Pauline. "Anyone who has acted against the interests of this family." The reaction was immediate. Richard paled and let go of Lucy's hand. "This is absurd, Lucy. You can't. I can, and I have. Everything has been legally documented and protected," Lucy replied. Harold Finch intervened. "All the changes are in accordance with the law, and additional measures have been taken to protect Mrs. Robert and her will." Pauline stood up abruptly, her chair screeching on the floor. "This won't stay like this, Lucy. You will regret it." "I've regretted many things, Pauline. Betrayed trust is part of it," Lucy responded, her voice no longer weak but full of authority. As the family left the room, divided between shock and murmurs of support for Lucy, she felt a strange mix of victory and sadness. The truth was now known, and although the future was still uncertain, Lucy knew she had regained not only her power, but also her dignity.